Thank you, Chair. It's an honor to be actually besides doyens of Indian foreign policy establishment. But I am the academic, so I'm going to be speaking slightly different. In fact, my mandate was to bring in a bit of the academic content and abstraction to this bilateral relationship. So I'll try my best. First thing that strikes us is the language that we use whenever we talk about this relationship in a broad sense. World's two largest democracies, right? So in academics, we have this the so-called the theory of the democratic peace, the idea that two democracies are never going to fight war with each other, and that the likelihood of a democracy going to war or conflict with an authoritarian system is much greater than that with a democratic country. Some people have extended the idea of democratic peace to also talk about what are called security communities, which are very closely networked, linked, and highly trustful alliances or coalitions, especially in the military sphere. And the argument is that two democracies can formulate security communities much more easier than if it was one democracy and one authoritarian country. This reminds me of the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's recent call for what he calls a democratic security diamond, in which he includes India and the United States especially, and of course Japan. And the idea is that these three countries, as well as South Korea potentially, if they can overcome their historical animosities, should come together because they have so much in common as democracies. So is this why India and the US are so special? Because we are two democracies. I think we are traditionally have been unenthusiastic about the democratic peace notions because we have geopolitical compulsions, and because we have a neighborhood in which we share space with authoritarian as well as semi-authoritarian states. So the USA, I think, is always going to be a partner for us, but never an ally or a treaty ally. And that has to do with these geopolitical compulsions that override the basic proposition of democratic peace. Strategic autonomy, which is of course been the bedrock of Indian foreign policy for the last 70 years since independence, and our own ambition of being a great power with our own followers, as in India becoming a pole in a multipolar world. I think all these are going to place limits on the idea of democratic peace, where we are very closely integrated in the form of a security alliance with the United States. So that's not happening. So what are we doing in terms of strategy, given these limits? Are we counterbalancing China or counterbalancing the United States? Are we happy with a multipolar Asia, or do we want a multipolar world? These are some of the constructs. I'm being a little abstract. These two are counterlinked. If we're only counterbalancing against China, then we are bandwagoning with the United States. If we are counterbalancing both against China and the US and are trying to build ourselves up as an independent pole in the multipolar world order, then we are essentially talking about hedging and being opportunistic, being more ad hoc, and not really having a doctrine that says, you know, this is an ally and this is an enemy. So, and this has to do with trust as well. Can the United States really trust India to stop spying on us, for example? Can we become the sixth eye? Some of you will be aware of the Five Eyes policy of the United States, where they don't spy, at least not as far as we know, on certain allies like the British, New Zealand, Australia, and so on. Can we become the sixth eye that the Americans are denying Germany, for example? Angela Merkel tried very hard last year to inveigle Germany into this elite club, say, can you say hands off, and not just tapping my phone, but on our entire networks? Well, I don't think we are at that level of trust yet. So here is the question. Is the US consciously promoting India's rise? Some people have argued that it is in America's inherent interests, even if you take away the China card and the China factor, to promote India's rise. But that would go against what we call realist theory in academics, because India's enhanced material capabilities would further the relative decline of the United States. Anyone growing stronger in the world is in some way or the other depleting the power of the United States in relative terms. But then American capitalists helped China rise up as a superpower or a great power by pumping in trillions of dollars of FDI into China. The realists were arguing even way back in the 1990s let's be careful. Let's not, direct our capital into the Chinese outsourcing machine to the point where they become too big for us to handle. Well, it has happened. Theorists like John Mearsheimer was saying in the early 90s that this is suicidal, we should not be doing it. Nonetheless, it's happened. And now, in a way, it's too late because China is breathing down the neck of the United States in terms of material capabilities. So I would like to think that there's also another theory. So far I'm talking about the balance of power, basic balance of power, and the differences in capabilities. But there's also something which would interest some of you, even non-academics. Stephen Walt has written this amazing article in 1985, almost 30 years old, where he proposes something called a balance of threat theory, and in which he argues that great powers, as in, let's say, the United States, try to counter only those rising powers which have offensive intentions. In other words, China, presumably, because of the conflicts of interest with the United States being much greater in the security sphere, is probably seen as one having offensive intentions. You just look at any US annual defense review document to see what I mean. Because while the State Department talks in a more diplomatic terms, the Pentagon does not mince any words and argues that they have offensive potential, they have offensive intentions, and we've got to be watching against them. They are the number one enemy or the number one threat. That's how they view the Chinese. So is India offensive to the United States? Certainly not. And I think at that point, we need to give ground to the Friendship Association and their mission, that there is something at the core which is non-offensive in this relationship, and we must promote that. So let me end by just referring you to a recent summit between President Obama and Xi Jinping in 2013, where the joint communique argued that United States and China must work towards a new model of great power relations, by which, of course, they mean rising powers and established powers which are declining, relatively speaking, need not go to war and can avoid war. Because historically, as you know, the rise and fall of great powers is linked to victory and defeat in warfare. So can the US and India also evolve something new, a new model of great power relations between the emerged and the emerging? I will leave it to the audience. Thank you very much.